I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next, the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I am joined by a living legend of the musical underground, Shane Embury of Napalm Death and Dark Sky Burial, as well as a host of various other projects with Shane being extremely prolific. And this is one of the coolest, most enjoyable, most mentally stimulating interviews that I have ever done, I would say. I was really excited to talk to Shane. I'm a huge fan of his music, and the Dark Sky Burial project, which is more or less a solo project that he started during the years of the pandemic, is a really fascinating musical, mystical, esoteric exploration, which sort of coincides with a process of self-discovery, I guess we can say, that Shane has gone through in the past years, involving a kind of a Jungian therapeutic process. Jungian individuation, I think it's called, which we get into. So we talk about that. We talk about therapy in general. We talk about some. We have some stories from the Napalm Death years about the Dark Sky Burial project, about the latest album. We talk about Cardiacs, an amazing kind of completely one of a kind English band that Shane has been an advocate for many, many years. Some great stories about them. And various insights from Shane about the music business as well, which were really, really cool too. So I'm not going to ramble anymore. I'm going to go straight into the interview. I'm going to play a track from the forthcoming record, which is out this Friday on Consoling Sounds. You can get some very delightful vinyl editions. You can, in general, go to Consoling Sounds for other releases as well, other Dark Sky Burial releases, of which there are quite a few. You can follow Shane and his Dark Sky Burial project on Instagram. I will put links into the description. You can follow me on all social media at Tom Osman Sounds. You can go to tomosmansounds.com for my music. You can go to patreon.com/whatever comes next for some extended interviews. And that's that. So, without further ado, Shane Embury of Napalm Death and Dark Sky Burial, take it away. Shane, Tom, great to meet you in real time.
How you doing, mate? You all right?
I'm all right. Whereabouts are you calling me from?
Uh, at home. I had to think about that for a second. The brain was a bit like, whoa. Um, yeah, just in Birmingham, outskirts of Birmingham, or Solihull, they call it actually, Solihull. So,
Okay. So like are you sort of essentially Birmingham born and bred and raised and everything?
not really, no. I'm about 1 hour, say 75 minutes from here. Because England is split into loads of counties, as they call it.
Yeah.
So it's called the county of Shropshire or Shropshire. Um, And I'm from a very small village called Broseley, which is close to a place called Iron Bridge, which is the first ever iron bridge built ever, I believe. And so I grew up there, and then came into town to meet to see a Napalm Death show. I didn't know the band, and then met the band and became friends, and and then finally moved here in Birmingham about 1990, I think it was. So yeah, I've been here since then.
Yeah, because it's funny with Napalm Death, obviously you've been in the band for so long, but I know that there were so many lineup changes in the beginning. So like I remember like Justin Broderick, I don't know if he was like at the very, very beginning, but he was, I don't know if you crossed over with him at all.
Well, it's yeah, it is a crazy thing because I'm still pretty good. Well, I'm good friends with most of them all really. Of course, you don't see them as often. But Napalm started in a bedroom in 1981 in a place called Meriden, which is close to where I'm here now, strangely enough. And then in 85, 86, Mick Harris came in the band and it kind of flipped over a little bit. And just, I don't think Justin is the original guitarist, even. I don't think. But he's the one more famous for obviously being on Scum. And so, yeah, so quite briefly, I suppose, it was the A side of Scum because it wasn't an album originally. It was going to be a split 12-inch. And then Justin left to play drums for a band called Heather David. I knew the guys by then. I was asked to come in, but kind of bottled it really. And then finally joined as Scum came out. But those first few years, especially in the first couple of the albums, massively like shifting, and of course that freaks people out still to this day, I think, really.
Yeah.
But there you go.
So what do you mean when you say that you were supposed to come in and you bottled it?
Well, because I was excuse me, such a good became a good friend with all of them. The original, I said, what was to me the original three piece, which was like Justin, Mickey, and Nick. It was just as I was just coming out of the tail end of my first ever death metal band, which is a band called Warhammer, and we were kind of like, it was weird because where we were, there was like nobody doing that. It was like a band called Onslaught from Bristol, and then English Dogs, which were a lot of punk bands you saw coming across from the punk to the metal. It was like this crossover period was happening around 84, 85, 86. I started tape trading, as did my friend with Bill Steer, Ken Owen, who later became Cargus. And so this tape trading thing was starting to bubble up. And so I started tape trading the A side of Scum. Justin left, and they played a show. I think it was in no, actually, I saw a show in Coventry, and then Nick Bullen, who was later in Scum with Mickey Harris, said, "I think I might as well ask you, do you want to play guitar for Napalm?" And it was quite about this time of year, actually, in 86, late 86. I said, "Yeah, sure." I was totally into it. I went back with then bass player Jimmy and Mickey. I played them some riffs, which later appeared on the From Enslavement to Obliteration album. But because, of course, is it what we kind of forget? No internet, like the distant phone call. Even though it was like an hour down the road, I was living with my parents, and I was kind of trying to use the phone when they wouldn't look. I was into trouble all the time for using the phone because I used to call my friends in the States as well, and she'd padlock the phone, and we just kind of didn't talk, and it just kind of drifted and drifted. And I don't think it was kind of chicken deal, but maybe it did a little bit. But I don't think there's any communication. And because Mickey, like most of us, very impatient, just kind of moved. So, well, I need to get this going. And so originally a guy called Frank Healy, who plays bass in Memoriam now, and was in some of the bands. He joined briefly, but he couldn't understand the blast technique. He thought that when the blast beat came in, that you sped up the riff, which of course was like all over the place. So he went. Bill Steer finally came in because Bill understood that. So yeah, that was that period, and I kind of regretted it, totally. And as the album came out, I know the bass player Jimmy wasn't too happy because Mickey Harris is quite an extreme character. It's sort of it is, and it can be, and we were still good friends. And I just came in at that point, just pretty much like I think I did one tour after Scum came out, and then I came in. The band was like on a roll. John Peel was loving it, and then we got to do the first John Peel session. So it's kind of mad, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
And so, in a way, well, I mean, if I'm going to sort of connect Napalm Death to Dark Sky Burial, which is essentially the solo project that you've got, which you now have. So this forthcoming album, the Sacred Neurotic, this is the 11th Dark Sky Burial album of new material. Is that right? Because Vitriol was a compilation.
yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Because it's I think a few Christmases ago I put out you could look at a sort of compilation, but there was extra tracks and there were different versions, which is the odd thing about electronic, well, any music, I suppose, but particularly electronic experimental. You can reinvent the track, which I quite like. I like, and probably will do in the future. Some of the songs that were instrumental will be re-envisioned vocally and stuff because I'm starting to get into vocals and things like that. And so yeah, about the 11th album, and then Yeah, so it's been quite a prolific kind of period, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so on the topic of the vocals, then I noticed that on the forthcoming record, there are a fair few tracks that have vocals, and I thought these could be you, but I'm not sure. Are these all your vocals on the record?
So some of them are, but not all of them. Um, because this album came as typical of anything, I suppose, came about in a strange way. As the pandemic came in, I started getting into my own thing, I suppose, but also alongside that, or just prior to that, just to general life, the dismantling of life as I once knew it, and whatever. I started to get into Jungian therapy. I didn't know that at the time, but my friend, I have one of my oldest friends is a guy called Carl Stokes. Carl Stokes was a drummer for a UK death metal band called Cancer for many, many years. I first saw Carl play in a really small pub in Ironbridge in Shropshire with his old heavy metal band called Spellbound. This is 1985. He had a leather drum kit. It was full on. It was amazing. And we were the same age, but he looked much older, I think, because he had a moustache, I guess. And we became friends, and just as you do there's a very small scene. So we kept, we've over the years we were close friends, and then we kind of, not for any reason, just drifted a bit because I moved here. And he kind of also been a good. He became more versatile with his drumming, and then I just remember just seeing him. He started playing for a 70s kind of, I don't know what you call a rock band called the Groundhogs.
Hmm.
So he started playing for those guys, and also playing drums for a couple of albums for Current 93, which is more of a
Yeah.
So this was, I was going, oh, this is interesting, and not really seeing him so much for a while. And then I heard through the grapevine that he'd become a psychoanalyst, a psychotherapist, whatever you want to call it, and which I had never quite understand. So I was having general life wobbles of various degrees, as I call them, just the life on the road versus at home, and just this how not really realizing how manic our life. I knew it was manic, but really, as he was getting older, it was just like things. What's going on, really, for all various reasons, and went to see him, and then he wasn't so much a patient thing; he was more of a mentor because we couldn't really be that way, which is quite, so as such, we were friends. So I got to get into into Carl Jung and the readings and stuff like that. And I found myself quite drawn to symbols and all kinds of stuff, and I was like, what's going on here, And so yeah, we discussed that. So anyway, so because we were still quite friends musically as well, we started making music together, which were originally going to be a Dark Sky Burial album as a split with a thing called Creases. Creases. That's where the last track's called Creases. But unfortunately, Carl over the past few years ran into some ill health, and he was like, "Well, why don't we make it a Dark Sky Burial album?" Which it kind of is, could be played on each other's music. It's essentially Dark Sky Burial, really. It's confusing, but not really, and so he sang on some of the songs to answer your question in a very long way, which I tend to do. I tend to, unfortunately, terrible at the thing of me. So something like Smother and Light and what's the one track? Crocodile Snaps. He sings on is on them, and there's some vocal additions on Creatures. So yeah, we have kind of both. We try to give it a more clearer voice on some of them, but his is a bit obviously he's a bit different to mine. It reminds me more of Brendan from Dead Can Dance a little bit on his style.
Ah, yeah. I see. I can't remember if Dead Can Dance came up before. If I mentioned that when I reviewed Vitriol, but Dead Can Dance makes sense as a reference point.
Yeah, we're both really I mean, yeah, really into Dead Can Dance and stuff. Both had this kind of, it's kind of strange how we kind of came from the metal background, but over the years, especially for me, I mean, my mom was a massive Sinatra fan, and and I don't know, this crooning things. I just became more and more attracted to it.
Yeah.
Dead Can Dance was just like the perfect thing because it had that crooning or whatever you want to call it, but it was also kind of like ethereal,
Yeah.
And so I loved all that, and just kind of somewhere another direction to take. That's what I really like about the experimental scene. There's no rules as such. Well, when they shouldn't be anyway, but I think that's how you move as you get older. You know.
Yeah, no, it's really all this sort of interconnections are really interesting for me because as sort of you've touched on the um Carl Stokes has got the current 93 connection. When I interviewed you via email before I brought up Coil and I discovered that you're also a massive Coil fan.
Huge fan of Coil.
And then, and like when I think of the music that I first got into, like I started out listening to kind of really shiny pop music, like Erasure and Depeche Mode and Eurythmics and stuff like that. And so I thought like, oh, like I like pop music. And then I got into a lot of more avant-garde and more experimental and rock music and industrial music. And then I realized like, oh, but actually all this stuff kind of comes back together because like you get into Nick Cave. Nick Cave was connected to Lydia Lunch and there's like Coil were connected to Mark Almond, and Mark Almond was in Soft Cell. So it's like a lot of this stuff that seemed like shiny pop music in a way was kind of coming out of the alternative underground in one way or another. So it's like you being part of Napalm Death and also being a big fan of Dead Can Dance and Coil isn't really that peculiar in a way.
No, I think it's not really at all. And I think through the medium or well, I mean, some sort of perceptions or journalistic reviews. I don't know exactly, but it was always a journey of discovery in a way, even if we didn't realize it. You know, because one of my good friends, Mitch Dickinson, who was in a couple of bands together with us with me, his brother was really into David Bowie and the Velvet Underground and Nick Cave and quite a few things. And yeah, so I think it just you're soaking it in, and then of course, and then through the school times too, it was really for me alongside the heavy metal side of things. A lot of my friends were into stuff like Depeche Mode or okay, someone who was in the dark or anything like Spandau Ballet. So you're totally soaking all that in too, you know. Which at the time, you know, there was this kind of heavy metal versus new romantics vibe. But later on, I'm like, I love all that stuff, you know. So it is, and you start searching for different music, I remember it was kind of interesting. Me and my friend Mitch would go to Rough Trade Records in London, and we're looking, you know, we're getting dead on cut offs on, you know, they were picking up Scatology or something by Coil, and people going, you know, this is not metal, and we're like, yeah, we know. But I think over the years, not so much now, not so much, but there was definitely a period where it starts. Yeah, I mean, people, Napalm Death fans, not all of them, of course, but a lot of sort of into one thing, or you know, and so I mean, it's not that weird, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, just a lot of the time it sort of depends on people's limited perceptions.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
What about some? So I think when we spoke before, it was just before you were about to do some live shows, and then you had this tour that you did with Napalm Death and Melvins, where you were opening as Dark Sky Burial. What was that experience like with those various live shows?
Well, I mean, it was good. It was I mean, I left the tour halfway through because I got ill, really, which I didn't get to finish the full tour, which is a long tour. The guys were shattered at the end of that. But I was there for about 3.5, 4 weeks, and it's a shame because well, I say shame, but but people really get into it, which was nice. Very nerve wracking for me, because I wanted to try and I keep on learning every other month with the experimental scene. It's a strange thing where because you come from that kind of metal background of performance, it's very much like repetition. You know, experimental scene is not always about that. So it's kind of you're so kind of paranoid about making a mistake, but then if it's a mistake, it's probably okay, you know, to do that. And but it was great. It was good to you know I did a mixture of things. It was only 25, 30 minute set, but I went from some rhythms to this thing called the pipe, which is by this company called Soma, which has different algorithms, and you can just turn your voice into this really ominous Gregorian chant, and then polyend. I was using a polyend synth to make some landscapes sounds and stuff, and it went down good. I was kind of nervous considering the you know you think well you're opening for Melvins and Napalm, but I think the general people, everyone here was pretty open minded.
Yeah,
It was good.
because I feel like in general with both Napalm Death and Melvins, they're both actually in a way quite within their own sort of worlds, quite experimental bands. Like Melvins are never afraid to do whatever they feel like doing.
Yeah.
And with Napalm Death as well, like in shit, I've forgotten the name of the album with the bird being squeezed.
Those of joy, yeah.
Throes of Joy. There were some tracks on that that were completely like there were things that were like Swans or like just some or Sonic Youth, and obviously you did the Sonic Youth cover as
Mm.
well. So I feel like Napalm Death have never been afraid to sort of stretch the boundaries.
No, I don't think we've ever been afraid, but I think the stranger the older we get, 'cause I'm sort of, oh, I am in the middle. I've had loads of stuff for a while, but I'm finally putting it together as like a demo for the next Napalm album. It's been quite a while because the band's been touring a lot, but we're less and less afraid of pushing boundaries. I mean, and that came. Some of the stuff on the last album came about from without any plan. You know, there was the songs that well, yeah, we rehearsed these songs, and Danny was getting a bit nervous. I'm like, "We're just going to go in." He's like, "Really?" I said, "We're going to go in. We've got these songs, and then we'll see what happens." See, I like that. I work even more like that now. The more and more, I actually like going to the studio without much of a plan. I just know that I have a few people around me that are really creative, and I know something good will happen because I have these people. So it's also the fun and journey, and just the fun of the journey, you know, because you get there in the end. And of course, you scratch your head a couple of times. One track doesn't quite work out. You go, "God, this isn't working," and then eventually you go, well, it's this, you know. But certainly with the next Napalm album, you know, I'm hoping we're going to get into it finally this coming year because they have a lot of there's always lots of touring because the band seems to be touring more and more, which is great on one hand. But for me, with a family and just not so much that getting old, well, maybe it is getting old, but it's just I'm sort of trying to balance the two. And I've been finding it a bit tough with that. So I'm kind of more taking a back seat, not a back seat. I'm doing less touring, but more writing. So
Mm.
I really want to get into this. I mean, it's one of these things, I think, really. Uh, but the next record, I certainly would want to push it further, really. You know, and I think people kind of maybe expect that hopefully as well. You know.
It'll be interesting, and I wonder, you know, for you with this sort of process of the Jungian individuation, the therapy, the what you're expressing through the music with Dark Sky Burial. I wonder how that is all going to inform what you do with Napalm Death and what impact that's going to have.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, it's the thing is, life is that journey, and you know, I'd be lying if I said the last few years have not been difficult for various reasons. You know, coupled just to the madness of touring. Um, Certainly, you know, I started drinking again on tour, and that was not doing me any favors at all, really. And you have to analyze why you're at that particular point. What's the reason? Well, there's probably many reasons, and it's probably not even the obvious ones. Even though I kind of have a few ideas, I think, and the guys in the band sort of saw this around me as well. They were like, "Wow, you know, we can see it." They could probably see the struggle more than me. The ego is like, "Well, I can do this." But then there's the guilt complex a little bit of, "Oh, I'm away from home," and there's this, and you know, you beat yourself up sometimes. Everyone does probably for no apparent. You just do it. I don't know, not always, but but the dark sky thing has been this current thing through it all, you know, which is kind of which is opening up a lot of interesting doors connection wise with different artists. Recently, the past year, I've been working with the scientist Matt Taylor, who studies gravitational fields for the European Space Agency. He's a big Napalm Death fan, so him and a few of his other friends who do sonifications of various things. They've done a documentary that came out recently called "Seas of the Sun," which Dickinson did a song for him. Me and this guy Klaus did like a bizarre experimental music piece for it. So all these little tangents of things are happening, and it's only a good thing for Napalm too. I feel, you know, to sort of push it into the unknown, really, you know, sort of because it can be safe. You can feel, "Oh, well, I'll do this and do this." That's cool as well, but there's also I like the unknown a bit, really, and you know what else can happen, and also it's really scary because you want to go into the unknown, but at the same time you've got to try and be in the present. All this kind of stuff's going on for me. Like I'm trying to be here, not like
Yeah.
not trying to reflect on a month ago, and not trying to shoot myself into the future too much because it's difficult to be in the here and now.
Yeah,
Really,
for sure.
yeah.
And going back specifically to the forthcoming album, so taking the title, The Sacred Neurotic, which you've got those sort of two elements of the kind of symbolic, the magical, the mystical, and you've got the inner mind. And those two elements sort of seem to be basically the foundation of the project. So what sort of, is there a specific meaning behind that name, why you chose that?
Well, I came across. Well, I've got like pages of these things I come across from various philosophers, or I don't know. It's interesting. You can. I'll type in something and Wikipedia or whatever. It'll just send you to a link somewhere, and that becomes. And I end up scrolling for hours. Go, that's a nice title. That's a great line. What if I rearrange it? And so I got loads of that. And I came across the sacred neurosis. I thought, okay, and I think in some of it is so it's based towards. I think Jung said, a few have said, is the neurotic, the sort of the feverish, the what you feel you're insane, possibly. But is it a truer vision of the world? Are we seeing the world purer than a lot of other people? And it's always like I mean, I don't, again, Carl is probably a bit more well versed to me, but he said, "Why do you call it the sacred neurotic?" Um, and there's an interesting thing on that because we recorded some of this back in like 2021, and I'm trying to think of what the titles track. I forgot what the titles track's called now. Can you believe it? But there's one track towards the end where there's a Alan Watts sample, and it says a person who thinks something like the person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts, and so then loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusion. And about 3 years later, I said, "That's about me, isn't it, Carl?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "What you tell me?" So I can't tell you. So you've got to find this out yourself. And I was like, "Man." And because it's again going back to I suppose what I said, the present, and we all just the mind's quite it's a pretty complex thing, and I think you can be imprisoned within it if you're not careful.
Definitely.
You can just and it's a classic. These things you're thinking, 99% of them will never ever come true,
Yep.
and you're constantly like beating yourself up about situations which are just complete fantasy. But of course, in fantasy, as Jung says, then it becomes what's it called? They become facts. Like if somebody might sit there obsessed with the cathedral buildings, and of course some of these buildings become constructed, then the fantasy becomes fact. So all it's pretty far out for me, and so I think with the sacred neurotic, it's really is about possibly about people who are maybe perceived ill or mentally ill, not mentally, but mental health issues. You may be seeing things in a purer light than the so-called norm, whatever that is. I don't know. Really, I don't know what is normal. Um, and I think, yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
Something.
I find that a fascinating topic, and I think about that a lot. And it intrigues me, but also scares me because there is that sort of element of letting go into the unknown. Sometimes I think, okay, if you can break away from the norms, you break away from what's socially acceptable, maybe you can get to some kind of truth. But then I think, yeah, but you might completely lose your grip on being able to sort of hold things together. So I feel I always kind of have that tension going on.
I think it's very scary you teeter between the two. I mean, when I decided about 5, 6 years ago to talk to go talk to Carl, a few people were like, "Well, it's not working," and then Carl would say to me, "Yeah, but as you know, it's not working. Usually, when you change, other people change around you, and it's not going to be easy. You open up this wormhole, this whole whatever labyrinth is a good word." Uh, I think Jung himself said that if you can coast through life without having to open that can of worms, so to speak, then don't do it because once you do, it poses more questions possibly than answers, and you're never ever going to probably find out everything. I mean, he said that whatever he discovered would probably fit on the end of his fingertip, and also to say don't be a copyist. Just because I've said this, don't go, well, this is you've said it. He says you've got to try and find your own path. So I'm definitely at such a point now where I'm like, well, I have to try and draw from different angles mean, recently I've been doing just like strength training with a friend of mine, just because trying to keep fit, even though I'm someone who's not really done too much apart from gigs for years. And we laugh together. But he's a really interesting character where he's had a illustrious path himself, and just through fitness and mental mind, he's given me another aspect to look at it from. I was like, oh, you try and balance all this up, and yeah, it is the unknown. But then Alan Watson, sometimes you just gotta let go. Anyway, and not that, and that's scary too. It's and it's certainly the mind is if you're not careful. I mean, now I've got to the point where when it starts going, I'm like, no, shut up, you're doing that thing again. Yeah, just no.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like, I hesitate because I'm like, oh, this is getting into very personal topics, but you're talking about very personal things. So, like, I personally decided for my own reasons to get into therapy about 4 or 5 months ago. And I actually specifically went into cognitive behavioral therapy because for me personally, what I felt like I needed is that I needed a way to change patterns and I needed kind of techniques that I could use when certain situations occurred that might have made me go into patterns in the past, like how to get myself out of these escalations. So, with that kind of what you've been doing, is there like sort of a specific practical side to that? Because I don't really know anything about the Jungian individuation. Like, what's that kind of like from a practical point of view?
That's a very good. I think that's a very good question. I think from a practical point of view, the CBT therapy, I've considered that myself too. Because there are patterns that you are aware of your pattern. The Jungian thing, I think, really, it can be a very spiritual one. I think if that's even, and that's tough when you say spiritual because I have mixed feelings on what that supposedly is. You um, and I think practically, I mean, I'm sure at a point now I'm loving the sort of Jungian basis, but I'm also from a practical point trying to put in the stuff I'm doing with my trainer because he talks it from a bit more a layman's point of view, if that makes any sense. It's like sometimes Jung is great, but it's a little bit like why am I trying to decipher exactly what he
Yeah, how
means?
that kind of like fits in with your actual life.
Yeah, because I could, but I think what that did is it kick-started or it made after at first it was I think really I used it completely artistically with Dark Sky Burial that at first, but then I knew something was going on, but over a couple of years I started some of the things I would read suddenly made sense to me. I was like, oh yeah, I get this, I get what's going on here with me. I think, and then there was this period of confusion. I mean, some of the struggles I've had recently on tour with drinking or whatever is I think, well, for various things, I have an addictive personality for sure. Um, so there's that behavior that, it's like the discipline. You have this discipline, trying to change the bad habits to good habits, things like that is always a struggle because it's easy just to stay with what you've always done. There's the ego likes that. I think it's the ego. He just says, "Well, we like this. You don't what you do. You don't change this up." When I started doing some training with my friend recently, I'd never done much. I was shaking. He said, "Yeah, that's your nervous system." He said, "It's not used to this." I'm like, "You're bloody right. It's not used to it." and But over time, it's helped. Because we look at things. Like he's really become a really good friend of mine. We're into similar stuff, really. So it's nice if you can find a trainer who's not just going to look at his watch while he's training you. This could be a good chats about all kinds of stuff, aliens and God knows what. But um, so yeah, I mean, I've been looking at the CBT as well because trying to get into some sort of pattern of to break some of those habits. I broke some of them, but
Yeah.
it's difficult. And I think with the touring, for sure, that's why. But it's a mutual thing between me and the band to sort of chill out a little bit because I went back a few times too early. You
Yeah.
know, I thought I got this nailed, and then boredom kicked in. I try to keep myself busy by making music and stuff, and that's fine because I can be quite prolific in that way. but at the same time, it's other habits, which the exercise and I mean, Barney's very disciplined on stuff. He's very good at that. So yeah, and then there's the ego.
Yep.
I'm like, well, I'm not. So it's trying to make sense of that. I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I've always done this. But I think that's what it was a few years ago. It was
Yeah.
something inside which is Jungian, in essence, in I suppose a little bit not Jungian, but something your unconscious is going. Well, no, there's some things you got to break here a little bit. But if you won't pay attention to it, it'll make you listen.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's going to be heard one way or another.
Yeah. So this is all needed for more than just. I mean, musically. Music's is certainly my therapy, but I think in life a few other things have to be put into balance as well. I mean, I have a family, and I'm not. I mean, we all have families in the band, but I'm the only one with children, and it was really loads of madness, really. But there we go.
Yeah. Focusing back on the musical side of things. So having brought up Carl and your work with him, I'm curious to know. So you actually started collaborating with him quite early on with the Dark Sky Burial project. Is he also doing a lot of drumming for you, and like on the latest album as well?
He did some drumming on the first track, Ken and Us. Well, actually, yeah, most of it is Carl drumming. Possessed by the Animus is interesting because I'm quite obsessed with drum and bass beats, and still am really. And Carl, because Carl was always a great heavy metal drummer, but then at one point he went to London to study to be a jazz drummer. So he just started to improve different techniques. He said, "Well, I can do some of that." I said, "Oh, really?" So we recorded a lot of his drum and bass ish loops, and we kind of and then rearrange bits and pieces. So yeah, I mean, it's really it's funny in many ways. We've always been great friends, but it was sort of like we started here, went out around the world on various paths, and then here we are again.
Yeah.
Which is good. I mean, I lived in Broadley, across the River Severn. There's Iron Bridge, and he lived just up the road. So strange, really.
Yeah, it's funny how these things converge.
But he played drums on the last Venomous concept album that I did, which is called Good Shit Lollipop. That came out a couple of years ago. And he's also playing drums on my heavy metal album, second Absolute Power album, which I'm doing, so he's doing quite a bit of drums. But Dark Sky is where we connect more on multiple levels, really.
So do some of those previous Dark Sky Burial albums have his drumming on them as well?
A couple of pieces here and there,
Okay.
not as much. And we're talking about doing something. Hopefully, at some point this year. I mean, my problem is I've got like about 5 different albums in my brain going at the same time, so it's a bit annoying to me. But there's one record we really want to do where it's very drone-esque kind of vibe, and again more vocally, sort of like a sort of Highland kind of influence, I suppose, in a way. That kind of. I really love them, and it's amazing when you do the drones, and it gives you more scope, more scope vocally. You can be a little bit out of key, and not really have to worry about anything. Guitars there, oh god, so yeah, some more stuff. Nicole.
This is a bit of it going off on a tangent, but I feel like you and maybe other Napalm Death guys have always, or for a long, long time, been champions of cardiacs.
Oh god, yeah.
And what happened with Tim Smith was such a sad ending, but at the same time, what they managed to do with that last album, LSD, is incredible. Like the story of how that album came together is unbelievable, and his involvement with that. Talk to me a bit about Cardiacs and their part in your musical history.
Oh, it's a massive part, really, because Cardiacs. It's not there now, but there's a small pub in Birmingham, what used to be called the Mermaid, and it's in Sparkbrook. Napalm Death. That's where I first saw Napalm Death, and there was these small little hand-drawn flyers. And there's a band called Cardiacs. They shared the stage with Napalm probably before I even joined them. But a small pub. So I knew the name. And they did the track Tarred and Feathered on a program called The Tube in England. I saw it and I was like, what the hell is that? And then 5 minutes later, was obsessed with that. So I started collecting the records. I joined the used letter. They had a thing called used letter, so I joined that. Got a letter from Sarah Smith, so that blew my mind. I thought, oh, they're right back, and there we go. I mean, Mickey Harris, of course, used to give me loads of grief about what they sound like madness. I'm like, oh, maybe a little bit, but not really. But leave me alone, please. And then when we did the NME front cover, I wore a cardiac shirt, thinking nothing about it. The manager flipped out. He was like, "Wow." I got to meet him on my 21st birthday. I was coming back from the Swedish Scandinavian tour, stayed in London. Cardiacs played. I met Mark. I was at the point where we thought we needed a manager, so Mark Walmsley was the Cardiacs manager for a while, managed us. So there was a bit of a link there. So I was constantly going to London all the time for various. I loved all my indie stuff, So anything. I mean, where the management office was above was the guy called Alan James. He was PR for Smashing Pumpkins, Elastic, all that kind of stuff. So he was just giving me all his CDs because he knew I loved everything. And so yeah, got to meet Tim. Become friends with Tim. We would just have these after-show conversations. We were probably we were out of our minds. We'd always talk about doing something together, but we never did. And they were just something about it. You can't explain to people who don't like cardiac. If you like them, you love them, as I do. It's just everything. It just there's something tapped. I try not to be too studious about it, but it just seems like, and I think I was similar age, but when I grew up, 3 channels on TV, you had there'd be like the Herbs, still children's program called the Herbs or Paddington, and all that. Not Paddington, that's one, but there's old TV programs that seem to have these. Tim Smith must have watched, and I don't know. There's something about this world which I completely related to with him, and the music was just like I loved the kind of carousel.
Yeah.
Stuff. I just love it. In the track skating underneath, when it bursts into that complete 3 minute, just I'm like, how the hell are they doing that? And it's just, it was just everything for me. And they became pretty much all my favorite band. I think beyond. And over the years, the influences have crept into Napalm with some of their arrangements. Done the different way. But me and Tim always said we would do something. We never did. And you go on tour for years, and I text him every so often. So how you doing, Tim? I'm in the middle of Arizona playing on Land in the Sea, which is my favourite record by him, pretty much. He would write back, "Come on, take us on tour." I'm like, "Well, I'll try," and that was it. And then when I heard the news, it was devastating. I would speak to Jim a little bit, text him occasionally, and did a record called Mutation, which was the John Paul, used to be in Cardiacs and Ginger, and I was kind of saying, "John, please, can we shoehorn a Cardiacs bit in?" Because he just hummed this bit. Next thing you know, there was this. I'm like, well, I'm veering off a bit, but and so. Came to about, I don't know what year it was, but we managed. I was speaking to Mary, or she's known by another. Her real name is, I'm not going to go, but she does all the cardiac stuff. She was, "Well, do you want to come down and see him?" And so, "I'd love to come down and see him." So we went down with me and my family, and he was there. And I didn't know at the time that he had LSD in the pipeline. I kind of had a rough idea it was going on. I mean, I'm afraid of Carvis, and then my wife said to Tim, she goes, she noticed it before me. She goes, "You've got that look in your eye." You wouldn't say, and he has a mischievous Tim Smith look, in a good one. And he was trying. And he had a keypad to write stuff down. And he said, "The last time I saw you, to me, you were eating ice cream." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And what had happened a few years ago, we had to reenact this roller coaster scene from an old BBC program where people were throwing ice cream. Mitch threw ice cream on me. Big roller coaster. So he was referring to this.
Do you know, sorry to interject for a second, this is so bizarre because I was talking to my sister yesterday about the fact that I was going to interview you, and I was like, I remembered it as being like, I thought it was like a Chris Evans thing, but maybe it wasn't that. But it was, there was something with Napalm Death where you're on a roller coaster and there was ice cream involved. And I couldn't exactly remember what it was, but that was my reference point. I was like, Napalm Death are kind of like in the culture, even if what they were doing was so far away from the mainstream.
It was a thing called the Priory. It's called
That
the
was the
Priory.
Priory.
But
Okay.
I think it was Johnny Morris's daughter. I can't remember her name. Johnny Morris, is that the guy? No, not Johnny Morris. I can't remember. Yeah, some BBC. I'm going to tell you it wrong, but it was her program, and we did like three things on this. Kind of silly sketches, but we were at Blackpool. We had got up and our guitarist Mitch. Well, he just basically threw ice cream on me before he even started going. So Tim was referring to that. Yeah, so he's totally sharp as a box. Yeah, sharp. And of course, I learned that they were still working on the album LSD, but they really kept it quiet. And of course, I was privileged to get an advanced tape, no sit tape download, whatever it is now. It was, I've heard a couple of people say, it's not quite the cardiacs, but to me, it's cardiacs, 100% beyond. It's everything really that they do. Mm. I managed to do some vocals on the last track. I got asked to do some backing vocals, so I was totally chuffed about
No,
that.
that's beautiful.
But yeah, I mean, going to be seeing Carver's, I think, in 2 days because he's playing with Kong and Henge. I love Henge as well. Henge is another band who's just, you know, loads of quirky. I love all that stuff. I've got my own project which I still haven't done yet. I've had it for about 6 years now. I've got about 10 plus tracks in a cardiac vein. It's very difficult to try and rip off the cardiac.
Yeah,
in the best possible way,
sure.
But we're going to get to that at some point next year, I hope.
I want to ask you a sort of a broad music business question because I've been thinking about this when I got the possibility to talk to you. I thought, oh, there's like one or two things I really want to ask you to sort of draw from your decades of experience in the underground music world. You know, I understand that there's kind of, if we, it's not just in music, but just like in the world in general, in business, in industry, there tend to be these gigantic monolithic companies and industries and forces and people with huge influence and huge power. And, money sort of gets funneled into different places. And a lot of the people involved in making things don't get much of a share of it. And I find myself when I get down this topic in interviews, it's like, this is where I'm going into my Marxist mode, not particularly intentionally, but that's just kind of like where it goes. And obviously, like just for one reference point, the Napalm Death album, you've got Enemy of the Music Business from back in the 90s. And I understand that Napalm Death were always a very kind of socially conscious and active band. And like there's a strong protest element in your music.
Mm.
So I wonder from your point of view, involved in underground music scenes for all of these years, for people, for myself, for listeners, for viewers, for people that love music and want to support artists and want, like grassroots music and underground music and like honest music that's expressing people's experiences that want this to thrive. How do we navigate this through the business? Like, is it just a case of with like the tech companies and Spotify and Google and Apple and Facebook? Is this just meet the new boss the same as the old boss? Is it just the same as it's always been, but we're just seeing these forces in different forms and people just have to kind of try and get through things in their communities? Or like, how do we navigate this world?
Well, that's a big question. I mean, is it the same as it always was? I mean, there's always been, I think, the labels and the bands. And notoriously, the labels always try to rip off the bands. Because as musicians, most of us want to make music, so we don't think about signing contracts and stuff like that. We do, but we have no idea what we're doing half the time. There might be one person in the band who's a bit more clued up or pays more attention. I certainly wasn't. I was like, whatever. Because I'm terrible now. I'm a bit more, I'm way more experienced, I guess, but I just want to get on and do the music. So then that brings into different questions about, so what are you doing? Because I never really joined the band to make money. I just didn't want to do the 9 to 5 thing. Yes, I'm a bit lazy, it's true, but I really like playing music. That's what I find. So that was that. Of course, you fast forward 30 years, and all of a sudden you're making a living from it. Brings up loads of different questions as well. There's a bit element of safety with that for sure. But of course, now with Spotify stuff, especially some of the stuff that some of the big ones are doing now, the sort of the Trump backing, and the bloody, the ICE campaigns and all that kind of shit. I mean, I've raised these points with Barn, and Barn was on the same page too. So that's something we're trying to address, which of course is interesting because Century Media wasn't independent, and of course is run by Sony, not run by own, but that brings into question for me various things. Really, even though I think at one point was I so strongly motivated? Well, I think I am because more so now because during COVID it seemed like we really had to dig in and start supporting each other, which stems back to the tape trading days, which was always about that really. And I like Bandcamp. I mean, I know Bandcamp I think has probably changed hands a bit, but it still seems reasonably for the bands. I think when it comes to royalties and stuff like that. And of course, someone who's been around as long as me, I guess, I'm sort of thinking of like, well, and you get a bit cringy about it. You go, well, how do I sort of do it? I want to make music. I'm trying my best to finance it, which I do. But how do I? Don't want to rip anybody off, but I'd like some support. But then I feel cheeky about asking it, and I'm like, well, how do I navigate that really? Because of course, I mean, with Dark Sky, I mean, people they like it. It's not. It's probably never going to be anything like Napalm, So I'm fine with that. Doesn't stop me not wanting to do it, So I want to do it more, really. And it is hard. I mean, it's finding how to support. I think a lot. I mean, it's a lot of bands, a lot of young. It's going to be hard for the younger bands, I think. And of course, it's not like I want to get on a pedestal about it, really. Neither, I don't think. But it's just like it's to me. I like. I'm really getting into. I love my Bandcamp. I love networking. Even though Instagram again is like, yeah, it can be. It's the corporate thing, I suppose. But there's certain ways you can use these tools to push yourself. But I think not. I mean, I still to this day, even though I make a living from that, I still feel guilty about it because when I was seeing Napalm down the road, it was like 7 bands for £1.50, and that punk rock attitude of like, well, pay no more than £2.99 is. I still get a bit like I get afraid of saying, well, I actually do make a couple of quid. I'm like, I almost sort of slap myself on the wrist and go, oh my god. But it's such. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to you try and go to the gigs. It's hard to get someone to go and see the bands, buy the shirts, I'm still trying to push with Napalm to him a bit more. We have control. We do have a lot of control, but almost a bit more. I mean, I didn't. But we renegotiated the idea with Century Media during COVID, and they're great. They're great. We know them all there, But I was really kind of pushing for something else during that time. But it is what it is. And I understand it's very hard work too, as well. I mean, that's the thing. I know that you get your own records pressed and stuff like that, and so it's really so hard to try and find the balance of yeah. And I think from a young artist point of view, they're really, unless they are predominantly going for that major thing, you've really got to dig in there old school way. I think it's gigging, merge, try and do as much of it yourself. Certainly think about if we make a record label because sometimes they only come knocking when there's a buzz anyway.
Yeah.
Half the time. I think that maybe a long time ago. I mean, one of my producer friends who just saying for Napalm, Simon FME, he produced Paradise Lost and a few bands and works with me a lot. He would say, like, he was working for Zombie Music for a while, and there'd be X amount of bands that he would be called in to produce. Maybe one of them got signed to a major, but I don't think, not sure that even exists anymore. But they only come knocking usually, I think, when something's been built up enough. I mean, there's a couple of bands that Russ has told me where that I think Evil Scarecrow was a band where they just said no, we're doing it ourselves and we're fine with how it is, and it's about control, trying to keep control, not control, trying to control for yourself.
Yeah.
But as regards supporting it, it's you got to try and go to the gigs if you can.
Yeah.
Things like that, and yeah, it's not what it was. But then again, what it was also had a big question mark in it as well. You got to try. You're going to, especially for new bands, new kids. You got to try and be a bit smarter. Beware. I think really.
Yeah. No, I definitely appreciate the insights because I think as well, it's like there's always the danger of romanticizing the past. So, I've read enough like music biographies to know like people have been getting screwed over since the business has
Well,
existed.
yeah. I mean, and it's who do you trust, and you feel you can trust somebody, and then sometimes it's like you want to play the music, but you want to be a bit, you want to be a bit lazy. So sometimes you're almost it's your own fault, not your own fault, but you're like, well, I should have paid more attention.
Yeah.
The whole thing with earache was when I saw Dig from Earache a few months ago. I mean, me and him were fine. I mean, I know I tried running a record label and then come across a couple of bands. I was going, gee, I was like, wow. I was like quite intimidated by. I made one mistake on one CD as a Japanese punk band, and they were like so vehement against me. I was like I said, I never want to do a record label again. It's very difficult. So the swings and roundabouts, But yeah, um, just be careful. And yeah, it's always been there. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, wrapping things up, Dark Sky Burial, you have the website, darksskyburial.com. When will there be pre-orders for the Sacred Neurotic, or is it that December the 12th will be when people can get
I
hold of
think
it?
pre-orders going on now via the Consoling Sounds website. So I think that's already going on as it is now, and it's limited. I think there's only like 300 vinyl, 400 vinyl. Same for CDs, pretty limited. It is okay. Then we'll repress it, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
And I get a nice tiny percentage of the records. I can do a couple of gigs, and I'm fine. It's all good for me. And I'm just putting some stuff together for because I like to do albums in fours generally, and so I've got another section of four albums planned, or the first one of the four, which is leaning more towards a band being more like early Swans, Children of God kind of era. Is
Ooh.
where in my head anyway. And I can't say anything yet, but if I get the drummer I want to get, then I'll be very happy. Um, and the first record, and so there's some good heavy tribal drumming, and all this, not reinventing the wheel, just spinning it in a nice fashion. Really,
That sounds very exciting. I'm fully on board. Shane, it was great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time and your insights and for sharing. Yeah, I'm a great admirer of your work and I love listening to what you do. And it was great to talk to you.
thank you, mate. Thank you, cheers.